Hi and welcome everyone to this Fireside chat about taboo topics series, a series of conversations I have with people about topics that I find aren't nearly enough talked about in our society. And today, my guest Rebecca Cavender and I are going to talk about abortion. First of all, hi and welcome, Rebecca.
Hello, thank you.
And we know that this is a very loaded topic, especially at the moment. That's also the reason why we would love to bring it up. And we want to say that for us, it's not about like weighing the pros and cons. For us, it's not the question if you're pro-abortion or anti-abortion or anything. It's more to open up the conversations around it, to approach it in an open way, to look at the different facets that might play a role in such a decision, and to show that it's really just a very complex topic that does not have a right or a wrong answer, that every body, every person has to decide for themselves. And it's a topic about choice and body autonomy. And we just wanted to have that out of the way, that we are not trying to convince you of any opinion, just raising awareness. And my guest, Rebecca Cavender, I've been following her for a while. She is an intuitive writer, a business oracle, and a guide, and she lives in West Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, on the traditional unceded land of the, and I hope I pronounced that halfway correctly, Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations, which is a place she calls home after having lived in 6 different countries on 4 continents. What really matters to her is honoring our unique, sensitively wild self-expression, so we feel free to be who we truly are. And that is of such importance to myself as well. That's why I'm really excited for her to be here today. And it takes listening to our authentic voice and knowing that even if it's a divergent, different voice, it matters. In fact, it can help change the world. Again, part of why we are having this conversation today, to help foster change, foster diversity, foster different opinions being heard. Yeah, so I would like to start off this conversation by having a little cycle check-in, because already in the terms of body autonomy, for people who menstruate or who have menstruated and don't menstruate any longer, for example, in postmenopause, connecting to our own cycle and seeing how we change from day to day can be such a powerful realization, even of we don't have to be the same every day. And regardless how we are, we can be tender with ourselves and honor where we're at that given day. So for me, I'm on cycle day 21 and I feel tired, also excited, and very grateful to be having this conversation. Rebecca, what cycle day are you on, and what are 1, 2, 3 words about where you're at today?
I'm on cycle day 22. I'm also feeling tired and a little achy and excited to be here and be with you and share today. So
Thank you. Yeah, the reason I wanted to have Rebecca here with me is that she wrote a really loving piece about how she became a priestess at an abortion clinic. And I would love to know, Rebecca, how did you get into that field of work? Did you train? Did you get there by chance? Was it your choosing? How did it all come about?
yeah, I was only 19 years old and so very young. with the nonprofit organization I worked at, which had a few different clinics. At the time, I was the youngest person they ever hired. Because you wouldn't think to hire a 19-year-old to work at an abortion clinic. Um, but it really was by chance. The truth is I was in a transition time myself, which I think abortion is a time of transition. And I found myself in a transition in my life, not sure which direction to go, kind of in between college a little bit. And I saw this ad in the newspaper and I felt really conflicted about it because I grew up in a very patriarchal, conservative religion. And I was sure it was totally against my religion and against
Mhm.
my the beliefs I was brought up in. Um, but I just felt this pull and this draw to be there. And I remember I was asked in the interview what my opinions of abortion were at the time, and I answered honestly and said I didn't know
Mhm.
because I really didn't. It wasn't something that was in my awareness a lot growing up. Myself, I was still a virgin, and so I just didn't have really any personal context for it, and I was open to kind of see where things landed for me. And for whatever strange reason, they hired me. I don't know why. And then I ended up working in that field for close to 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And maybe they felt that pull on their side as well. Of we have to have her with us.
Mm.
Do you think that it was maybe even exactly this openness that you brought without having an opinion that played a role in them hiring you because you could approach the whole subject from a very neutral space?
It may have been. It may have been part of it. I think that they found that, I was at least really honest
Mhm.
about the situation, and that I was at a place where again I was open to see what the experience would bring me. And I'm sure they'd ideally would have wanted someone who was extremely pro-choice, and especially during that time we had a lot of protesters and there was threats of clinic violence, and so they probably wanted somebody who felt strongly enough about the issue that they wouldn't be afraid, and would still be able to be resolute enough to face some of the challenges of just working there with safety and violence, or threats of it. But I, yeah, I've actually never asked them why they ended up hiring me, but it was someone who was trained as a therapist who did hire me and then trained me. And so I was kind of grandmothered in at a very interesting time, even legally. So I was brought in to actually train the reason they hired me was to train to be an abortion counselor.
Mm.
And so I had a therapist spend um, a lot of time just one on one with me, teaching me about anatomy and everything I had to learn. I was so innocent and just not knowledgeable about cycles or where the cervix was or anything, let alone like reproductive cycles. And so they just took a lot of time with me, and really grounded me in the culture. And yeah, I was very fortunate to have that kind of um, real intimate training, which I don't, you know, I was probably one of the last people that got that kind of really personal, hands-on, in-depth training like that.
Mm.
Very
Yeah,
grassroots. like.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you even phrased it as she grandmothered you into that role, which shows already this reverence also towards age, or like towards people who have more experience, who have more wisdom. And like in today's society, we see so often that aging is like a bad thing. So it's so cool that you could see her as this almost also like a midwife, midwifing into your own process through your own transition, I suppose.
Very true. And then to mirror that in terms of that was then my job to do for women that came to the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you ever experience what you said, like violence or people with lots of animosity?
Yes. Yes. There were times it was really scary. We definitely had a lot of protesters. I worked, in the 1990s, especially clinic violence just rose um, so I was in the United States at the time. And so it was a lot more volatile. And so, yeah, we had, um, there was one point we actually had U.S. Marshals, which are like federal police, basically, that the Attorney General for the whole United States had to sign off on having sent
Wow.
U.S. Marshals to protect the clinic where I worked. Um, it was really scary sometimes. And every year we'd have in services with FBI agents that would come in and teach us safety and even things like, how to tell if someone's following you, don't register your car at your home address so that somebody can't track you down. Our doctors had to wear bulletproof vests and we'd have to take
Wow.
special routes. Yeah, and when I worked there, then we got, bulletproof windows put in, security guards that were armed, the whole thing. It was really intense at times.
Yes,
It was
I
sometimes
believe
very
that.
scary. Yeah.
Phew. And you went through it nevertheless, did not wavering almost, and you went there and assisted these women as a counselor.
Yeah.
What was your role more to hold space for their process, or was it also to like help them decide a yes or a no, or were you mostly present at the actual abortion moment, or
Hmm.
all of the above?
Yeah, all of the above. So, and over working there for many years, and my role kind of shifted and changed as well. At one point, I was the manager for the clinic too. So, much later on. But at the beginning, I was hired just at the very beginning, my job was just to come on the days we had abortions and be with the women, counseling them on that day to make sure that they had informed consent, and that they understood the procedure, that they had support, went through their medications and aftercare, and really helped to witness them in their process. And also discern to make sure that all of that could occur, like that they really were, that they really were firm in their decision. And and then over time, then then they had me work on the phones and make appointments, and a lot of that was holding space and counseling for people if they were sure that maybe they weren't sure, they were just getting information about abortion as an option. And then for people who were really unsure and lived locally, then on days we didn't have abortion services, then I would counsel people one on one and they could come in and I could spend an hour just doing options counseling with them and helping them feel into like their head and their heart and see, what was the best choice for them at this time and just just having somebody to process that with, because it can either be a very easy decision in the sense that people are clear, like right away, this is what I'm going to do. It can also be a very challenging decision in terms of just really conflicted, and anywhere in between.
Mm.
And so, yeah, and then I was always the person, that if a woman was especially anxious or had gone through, um, well, let me back up. Always with the doctor, there would be an assistant to the doctor in the room who usually could help provide some support to the woman as well.
Mm.
But in the cases of people who were very anxious or had had trauma or were alone and couldn't have medication, or whatever the case was, a more complicated situation, they would ask me to be the person to go in and, just be with focus on the woman alone during her abortion, and so to help her breathe and literally midwife her abortion, to midwife that part of her that she was releasing and letting go.
Wow.
Yeah.
I suppose that were very intense and deep experiences. And you already mentioned, like in that piece of writing, you mentioned that there was, like in hindsight, it was the moment of training as a priestess, because like I know a bit about you and your background and the priestess circle you're part of, and I consider myself to be like this midwife priestess, this one of moving through transition. So I suppose that's what you were doing in that moment, like um, believing in that person, in that woman, and that she couldn't make it through no matter what, and that she could make it through according to her own wisdom, her own pace. Is that, do I describe that like correctly?
Yeah,
That
very
was
much
that your experience?
so. Yeah, very much so. And as you said in the piece that I wrote, yes, in hindsight, I realized I was in my priestess training. I mean, most definitely in the room and also with the counseling piece, but especially in there because I didn't know anything about energy work or doulas or all of this kind of, or the divine feminine or any of that. But I did know instinctually that it was incredibly powerful to be able to be there and just focus all of my presence
Mm.
with that woman, and nothing else mattered. The doctor didn't matter, the assistant didn't matter.
Mm.
It was just holding space for her and becoming so present to be able to do that, that she could be present for herself, that
Mhm.
she could be able to just be completely in her body and in her heart and allow whatever needed to be processed through her and experienced through her to happen. And really, it was death. It's midwifing a type of death. It was a part of her that she is letting go, is letting die, and not just an embryo, or a fetus, but also, you know, hopes or desires or dreams. I mean, one of the most powerful things that I learned about abortion was that it's not about abortion. It's about a woman's story, and it's about
Mhm.
her life, and it's about her current experiences and what led her to the place that she is right now, and and she's making a choice at the crossroads because something is not aligned for her.
Mhm.
Something is not right for her. And so to trust her, and that she has the capacity to choose which path is the most aligned for her at this time. And if that means ending a pregnancy so that that can happen,
Mhm.
that's that's the piece that I don't think a lot of people understand, that is people focus on the abortion, but it's really about what has led you to this place and what is it that you now desire so much in your life to move forward that you would choose to have an abortion. That's a very huge ache and yearning and clear wanting to, because abortion isn't pleasant for anyone.
Mhm.
And it's not traumatic or difficult for everyone either. It can be very, very clear cut and very simple and very without there being very charged emotionally at all. But at the same time, it is a very clear, direct decision that you can't come back from.
Mhm.
So if you're making that clear of a decision, then it's very powerful, and that means that there's something that's motivating that is equally powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's this cutting away of even part of your identity, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you shared, some people, they want to be mother, but for whatever medical reason, the safest decision for her right now is to have the abortion. And so
Yes.
part of her identity dies. Yeah.
Yes, that's definitely is a story that occurs a lot, and is very, very sad when it's a wanted pregnancy. And for whatever the medical reasons are, that it's not safe to continue that is heartbreaking. It's there's so much grief there. And then there's a lot of women who are already mothers.
Mhm.
And so, but they're thinking about their children who are already here that they have to care for,
Yeah.
and that they're sacrificing. Maybe, there a lot of times what I would hear is that they wish they were in a place that they could welcome in
Mhm.
another being, another person, and care for them. But if they did, how much of an impact negatively that would have on their current family, on their
Mhm.
current children, and they just weren't willing to sacrifice that,
Yeah.
the well-being of the children that they already have.
And to be honest, it's not just, well, the way I see it, it's not just about making the decision for the children they already have. It's also making the kind of, as strange as that might sound, but the best decision for the baby they are aborting, because what world would it live in?
Yes.
And
And
I think that's something many people don't realize, that um, when you want somebody to not abort and you want to prevent that with all measures, then I find you should also provide for that person having to raise a child when they maybe don't have the means.
yeah. And that becomes so complicated because you might have someone who is going through a mental health crisis.
Mm.
You might have somebody who has drug addiction. You might have somebody who's in the middle who doesn't have any financial, means whatsoever. And in the United States, there's not socialized medicine. I mean,
Mm.
in the United States, people have to pay have to have private insurance to be able to go to the hospitals to get medical care, unless you don't make enough money to get government insurance. But there's no socialized medicine. And so many people are, it's extremely expensive for them to even have, with their medical bills, to be able to give birth. And then there is very little time off of work. Oftentimes, even me, when I took time off of work to have my daughter, it wasn't paid. I didn't have parental leave. I mean, in Europe and a lot of places, that's part of the government systems that it's seen as a human right to hold and take care of the whole family systems. And that's just not the case in the United States at all. Those systems are not in place.
And in a lot of other countries too. Like I have worked for a feminist women's rights organization working in countries of war and conflict, in Africa, in Afghanistan, and all these places where there is definitely no medical insurance either.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So then the dire situations that women face. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love how you describe this moment of power, this powerful choice, and like the sovereignty always residing within the woman, and this trust that you brought towards her, that she is making the right decision for her at this point. That is so validating, and we don't have many spaces like that.
Yeah.
We are so quick to judge and not consider the circumstances. B, we might not even know them, but then we can still trust that the person knows because she's living in that place. So how couldn't she know?
Right. I love how you mentioned you worked for these feminist organizations, and that was the nonprofit I worked for too, which I think is a huge piece of why it fit into the priestessing, honestly, is because that organization I worked for in the state that I lived in, they were the very first abortion clinic, I think, at least the very first nonprofit, independent, feminist abortion clinic. And so the philosophy was that we trust women. We trust them. We want to empower women to know their bodies, and way beyond abortion, but to understand their vaginas, to understand their reproductive health systems, to trust and to trust themselves, to trust their bodies, to trust their wisdom and their knowing. So how can that, if we are sending messages, if any of us say, oh, we trust women to know their bodies, to be in their bodies, then how can you not trust them to make a decision with their body around whether they're going to become a parent or not? There's a real disconnect, you know. There's not a true trust there if you say you only trust women in this capacity, but you can't trust women in this capacity. And so for us to be able to, my job was never to determine if they were ready to have an abortion or not, or if abortion was the right choice for them, or for that matter, when we went over birth control options. It was not my decision to say, well, I think this is the best method for you based on what you're telling me. No, I was there to just simply provide the information to a person and say, I entrust you. What do you believe? Let's empower you to make the choice you feel is best for you, whatever that decision is. And as you said, there is a lack of that in our world. I think even when we think about, our daughters and our children and the way we talk to our kids, we don't teach them to trust themselves. Mm-hmm. And a lot of women don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
So to be able to go to a place and say, I trust you to make this decision for yourself. And it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not my story. It's your story. Yeah.
Oh, that is so important to get us out of this drama triangle. I don't know if that's a familiar concept, but like usually there are 3 roles that you take, and people swap roles over and over in one conversation. And you're like either the persecutor, you are doing this wrong, you're making the wrong decision, or you're the victim, I don't know, or you're like the rescuer, I know what's best for you, you know. But to get out of this whole concept and to just be whatever is present is welcome, is what needs to happen right now, and I trust that you can find your own way through.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, and hey, you might need some information too. So let's make sure you're well informed so
Of
that you
course.
can make the decisions, right? And
Yeah.
so make sure that there's access to accurate information and you have somebody who's holding the space that can give that in a non-judgmental way, a non-biased way. And not just about abortion, like you said, but about anything, right? Um, and so a lot of times that's all we need is we need to be able to have accurate information, and then once we have that we can sift through it and feel in our bodies, feel through our lives what is true for us, what is right for us right now. And maybe we wish that the circumstances were different, but given the fact that the circumstances are what they are, what is the best decision moving forward? And um, and then to trust, ourselves to be able to do that.
Mm. And remembering a story from someone close to me who told me that when she was young, she decided for an abortion, and some years later, she got shown like a fetus and how developed it is at a certain week. She said she would never do it again, however hard the circumstances. But it shows that she still made like the right decision for her in that moment, and that doesn't have to be the decision for like forever set in stone, but it's always about what's important right now.
Yes. Because our reality and life is always changing. And that's the other thing. Like, nothing is static, nothing stays the same. And so, for us to think that we can be so fixed on one idea, we never know until the circumstances change, right? And of
Mm-hmm.
course, you might change your mind at another date. That's wonderful. Okay. Because life is different.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's very, um, I remember thinking at different times working at the clinic, okay, now I understand a little bit more about abortion and women. Okay, and now I'm comfortable, personally, my personal views are I'm comfortable with abortion up to a certain gestation, or I'm comfortable with abortion for everyone under certain circumstances. And anytime I would put a boundary or like some kind of value or something around that, guarantee within the next few weeks I would meet a woman who pushed up against that. And I wouldn't, can I swear?
Yes, please.
I was like, I wouldn't give a fuck about how far along she was or anything else anymore. I only cared about her. I cared about her story and what she said. And so, what I learned was that when you sit and you are next to someone and they're telling you their personal story and you are feeling them and you feel their clarity about something or their heart, then you're gonna, I just think it's just the like natural, compassionate thing to do to support them in whatever that is. So my personal views were always getting
Mm-hmm.
further along on the spectrum because of every single woman I would meet. And you know, those arbitrary rules don't have a face until they have a face. And then when they have a face, you don't care about those lines anymore.
And that's so much of what I see out there. Like we stress ourselves to be behind on stuff, not doing enough. But all of this comes from, as you say, arbitrary rules that either we ourselves or someone else has made up.
Yes.
And I understand that it's very scary to step out of these boundaried rules. And so I really want to honor and celebrate you for like when you were faced with this circumstance that shattered the boundaries you set, that you were open to have them shattered and stand there again naked, kind of,
Mhm.
in that not knowing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what priestessship is also about, becoming comfortable with the not knowing, the mystery, the potential too.
I completely agree with you, because it is that knowing, that being able to surrender to this place that our lives are mysteries,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is the mystery, and we don't know.
Yeah.
As much as we think we know, there's so much we don't know. And so, but can we trust ourselves in a moment? Because that's all we can lean into, is what feels true in the moment right now. And can we trust ourselves in that, knowing that what's real for us can change again shortly, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Life is happening. Life can be messy.
yeah, it usually is.
Do you remember like a certain client or something that stood out for you? Or like I imagine it's hard having so many stories of so many women and carrying them all within you.
Hmm.
I don't
There,
know, do you have like something that stands out for you, or is it just all equally sacred for you?
they're all definitely equally sacred, but there are people who still stand out that I remember. And I haven't done the work. I haven't been in that world for about, maybe 10, 11 years now. Um, but there are people who I definitely still there's even people I'm still connected to. Um,
Wow.
there are there are people who I I remember sometimes the more extreme cases too, like if someone was extremely young, and there's been rape or violence or whatever, or some people who would travel so far. I mean, we had people that would come to our clinic from Alaska, from
Wow.
I live in Washington State. They'd travel from Alaska, they'd travel from Canada, they'd travel from Montana. I mean, people would travel so far, even in the winter and when it was difficult. And so the extremes that and the sacrifices, the financial sacrifices, the time, trying to figure out, if you take time off of work, or if you have kids, who's going to take care of them, if you have to travel so far.
Mhm.
Um, I
Yeah, and
keep,
that brings me to one something you said or wrote in that piece, that like abortion is not going to stop and people will take risks when it's banned, to like all these risks you just mentioned that they took when it was allowed, and now imagine it is banned and how much more unsafe it's going to become.
it's very scary, because there are people, alive in the United States, for example, right now, who have had illegal abortions in the past. They're in their 60s now, or their early 70s, or older. And, um, a cousin of mine who's my mother's age, so in her late 70s, wrote a post saying, yeah, one of my good friends who was a nursing student died when I was young from a botched abortion. Um, another woman wrote a comment on the article that I wrote, who shared her experience of being blindfolded and taken to a basement of a church to have her abortion done. These are people who are, very much the psyche, the remembrance is still very alive. The stories of these women. This was not long ago when abortion was illegal, and all of these, underground communication networks had to be set up. Um, and all across the world, so many places abortion's really restricted or not legal. And so this is already happening. Women have always had abortions. And again, like one of the things I said, it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. They have always happened. They always will. There's a bigger problem when women don't have access to legally safe and medically safe abortions, is that they die or they have terrible infections. And when women die, and have bad infections, or if you could even think about nowadays with the social media, and already there's human trafficking. I don't even want to think about how diabolical and dark trafficking women to get abortions could be in a very unsafe way. I mean, people harvest organs, and I mean, there's all kinds of things that already happen to get when someone's desperate. There are people who commodify desperation. So this increases the risks of all of these kinds of horrible things that might not be as common but could absolutely happen. But
And they may not be as common, or we just don't know because nobody talks about it.
right, because they might not survive it, or because of the stigma and because it's illegal. But if you're a woman who's living in a certain country where there's not access to safe legal abortion, you might be going to the local midwife, or you might be going to somebody else who may not be using clean utensils, might not have tons of experience, might be doing things to cause an abortion that, could be harmful. So people will take it into their own hands in whatever way, shape, or form they can. Women were self-inducing abortions for thousands of years. Women will continue to do whatever they can, whether they're throwing themselves down the stairs or they're putting a coat hanger inside of them. Mm-hmm. And so, but when women die, if you don't care about like anything else, you probably care about like, our socioeconomics, our global economy, our global health, our global safeties, and things like that, our community health and safeties. Women make up the biggest economic force globally. We're the ones that bring the most money in the world. So anytime women and children are impacted, whether it's malaria or polio or, whatever, a global health issue is, then it impacts the global systems, like all of the systems that are impacted. Or if women are forced to give children they don't want to have, you're looking at all kinds of the mental health of communities being impacted. And maybe I shouldn't go too much into that because I don't want it to seem, again, like I'm trying to like you said at the beginning, trying to convince people of a certain thing, but I wanted to bring it up from the standpoint of maybe that hasn't been thought
Yeah.
about like abortion isn't just about abortion.
Right.
Abortion is about, and it's not even just about our own choice and our autonomy. It actually impacts a community's welfare system, mental health systems, social systems, economic systems, and that has an impact globally because we see, and globally, especially in developing countries, when women aren't, they die for whatever the condition is, it makes an impact and makes communities less safe, and there's less available, and there's more poverty. And then when there's more poverty, there's more crime. So this is just one example of what happens when women across the world don't have access to any kind of safe health care.
Yeah,
Right?
and while you are speaking all of that, I'm reminded that when I do these things and these thought processes and like thinking things through, people like reproach me for being oh so pessimistic or like making it all up. And like, no, I just want to have the whole picture on the table. And I'm particularly reminded of like my time at that feminist women's rights organization because we were supporting women who had experienced sexualized violence. So who may have been raped and had children from that rape, and
Yeah,
they couldn't connect to these children because they would always, of course, remind them of that moment. And like
course.
we supported local organizations who help these women and children get together and like become more connected. But when this disconnect happens and nobody is there to help them resolve the trauma around that, like it perpetuates. The child is traumatized too, the woman is traumatized, and both will impact like their behavior. It will impact other people too. And like what will
Schools.
those children have of
Yeah.
a relationship with their own children, you know?
Yeah. It becomes intergenerational,
Yeah, it
like a
does.
repetition of the trauma. It'll impact, resources at the schools, like if there's schools available, even, all of
Mhm.
the things, right? It's
Right.
when you have, oh, that's so sad.
Yes, and you find the most amazing strong women and children there. Like they like when they get a little bit of understanding that what happened wasn't right,
Yeah.
they develop all these or they find all these resources in themselves, and it's beautiful to see what can arise from such a traumatic event. So um, there is lots of hope too, fortunately.
That's good. That's good.
And yeah, I personally think it all starts with what we've referred to as the body autonomy, learning to trust ourselves to make the
Mhm.
right decision for us right now,
Yeah.
and trust another person to do the same for themselves.
Right. And then that's it.
um, do you have to maybe close this all up? Some last final words that you would say, or your message to this world um, that you think people need to hear?
Mm.
I know that you are a very intuitive, sensitive person. So if something wants to channel through, feel free. If not, it's of course, I'm already so grateful that you agreed to have this conversation. And I hope that people will take a lot out of it. but I just want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah. What I feel like, what feels like wants to be said is that there's an invitation for all of us to come into greater compassion, um, and non-attachment around so many different issues that we have judgments and staunch beliefs around, abortion being one of them. The past couple of years, we've all been in this globally every single person's been touched by the pandemic. So we've all been in this massive transition globally. And everyone is aware that we have been in this time of massive transition. And in transitions, you're in that cycle of birth, death, rebirth. And it's hard. And so I think taking that context of bringing in, oh my gosh, I know at minimum that every single person on this planet has been going through something very difficult in this big transition the past couple of years. People have had lots of opinions about all of that too. But what what looking at yourself, how would you want somebody to treat you? How do you wish someone had spoken to you during the past few years of this transition you've been in your life? And can you really reflect on that? How would you have wanted someone to hold space for you compassionately without judgment, but also honoring you? And then how can you move that forward to all places in your life? Like, how can we all take something that's been really difficult and bring something beautiful to it moving forward? That's what I kind of feel like we have this opportunity to have much more depth of compassion instead of judgment if we choose, especially since we know how hard transitions are. And then if you take that towards the issue of, one issue like abortion, then you can say, wow, okay, transitions are hard, and I can hold space for the fact that somebody is going to be going through something, because abortion's a transitionary time for someone. And so really to be able to apply that towards yourself, what you wish people would treat you like, and then try to do that towards another person. I just feel like in our world we're missing so much of that compassion. And I don't mean no boundaries, but I mean compassion and again trusting and just letting things go so that something new can come forward. And I'm hoping in a world that's so divisive and so stuck, people are so fixated, that we can just come to a place of actually realizing nobody's perfect. Nobody has all of the answers. Everyone's just doing the best they can in the moment. And if you can actually even just carry that compassion for yourself, I'm just doing the best I can in this very moment, and think other people, they're probably just doing the very best they can in this moment, which might not look too great to you, but most people really are trying the very best they can. And I think that can just open us up to just releasing a lot of judgment and expectations on ourselves and on other people.
Those are so true, powerful words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing them. It feels almost like you bring this quality of holding space that I also try to do and give to yourself, holding space for yourself and for whatever is present and letting it be there without judgment. And then very often we find, as you say, things release on themselves, like of themselves, like you don't have to do anything. They just pass and something new arises.
Yeah.
When we allow this, like allow what is present right now to be.
Yeah. So true.
Thank you for being here today. I will link your piece of writing in the description. If people are interested in hearing more or in connecting, where can they find you, or what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, probably my website, which is just my name. So it's RebeccaCavender.com, and Cavender is just like lavender, but with a C. So just RebeccaCavender.com is probably the best place to start. It's the easiest way. And then you can find other ways to contact me from there. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. I hope this is going to spark a lot and ease up a lot for people. So if you as the watcher or listener would like to reach out to us, to Rebecca or to me, feel free. We're here. We love to talk with you, to hear your stories too, and to hold space for you.
Yeah.
Have a beautiful day, everyone.